Without further ado, I'd like to go over and introduce Paco Salaber from the European Commission. Paco will tell us about the policy level actions coming from the CNS Advisory Group, which was created by the European Commission, looking at how regulatory and policy tools could be used to ensure the CNS infrastructure needed to support a future operational concept can evolve in a more efficient and timely manner. Spectrum is at the center of the discussions in this regard. And the group developed a report that provides recommendations and an action plan to be implemented by the stakeholders. But Paco will give us a little bit more on the recommendations of this study. So Paco, welcome, and over to you.
First of all, I would like to thank RTC and Eurokai to invite me to participate in this global summit on a spectrum that demonstrates the spectrum of the importance of a spectrum in ATM. But why a spectrum is important? I will say that there is no air traffic management service without CNS services, and there are no CNS services without a spectrum. A spectrum is as important as having avionics, terrestrial systems, or satellites to provide CNS services. In my briefing, I'm going to talk about what the European Commission is doing on the use of a spectrum by aviation. But before starting, let me present how the European Commission is organized to set policies and harmonize regulations on the use of a spectrum in aviation across 27 member states of the European Union. This may be useful in particular for those colleagues in the US and other regions that are not familiar on how we are organized in Europe. So in Europe, in the European Commission, there are 2 directorate generals involved in a spectrum that are somehow equivalent to ministries at national level. So we have DG Move, where I work for, that is in charge of transport policies, including aviation, and DG Connect, that is involved in the setting the policies for spectrum and interface with the telecom industries. So in DG Move, we are in charge of establishing policies for aviation, including ATM, and their implementation in close coordination with our agencies and bodies like EASA, the Eurocontrol Network Manager, the CESA Joint Undertaking, the CESA Deployment Manager. We have a cooperation partnership with Eurokai, and we are the interface of the Commission with ICAO. DG Connect is in charge of setting a spectrum policy and regulations in an harmonized way and in coordination with the spectrum regulatory authorities at national level in 27 states. So DG Connect, it's the interface of the Commission with ITU and its European region group called the CEPT and its Electronics Communication Committee. So we have a very fluent relationship and fruitful cooperation between DG Connect and DG Move. So we are connected and in close, having meetings and iterations every week. And just to give you 2 examples of the things that we are doing in cooperation inside the Commission is to facilitate the cooperation between the telecom industry and aviation industry to achieve that the future and current regulations on the use of 5G will enable a safe coexistence with radio altimeters. So we are engaged in all the discussions of the group that is run by ECC called PT1 that is working on the safe coexistence of 5G and radio altimeters, and to coordinate with DG Connect, who is preparing their new regulations for the upcoming use of 5G in other bands. Another area of cooperation that we have between DG Move and DG Connect is that we are coordinating to prepare the position of the European Council to the World Radio Conference 23 that is upcoming next year. And we are taking into account what is the position of ICAO and what can be promoted as part of the EU policies in aviation. So these are the things that we are working here. We think that it's extremely important that we have a communication at regulatory and policy level between the 2 DGs of the Commission that are working on a spectrum on aviation. But then after this introduction, next slide, please. I want to develop further what Anna has explained. So in DG Move, we established a group of experts 2 years ago involving different organizations, EDA, so that means the military, EASA, Eurokai, Eurocontrol Network Manager, CESA Deployment Manager, and CESA Joint Undertaking, and also bring the stakeholders that are implementing CNS. As producers, we have representative from IATA, ANSPID, represented by CANSO. We have also EBAA, the Airports Council International, and also representation from the professional staff organization. So we have been working 2 years on defining recommendations to improve the CNS implementation. First, identifying what is the problem statement, what are the problems that we are facing in the CNS implementation, looking forward for solutions and actions to implement the 12 recommendations. I'm just going to focus on the 3 actions that we identified in the CNS report and action plan on spectrum that are presented in the next slides. Please, next slide, please. So the first action that we have agreed is to protect availability of the spectrum for aviation and ITU, considering global interoperability. So our objective, and it's part of the coordination that we have with the stakeholders and DG Connect, is to align the European positions at WRCs with the aviation needs, to define a policy level objectives for radio spectrum needs to support safety services, and to define susceptibility levels for CNS technologies to protect existing services from out-of-band interference. So on this action that we are proposing for, that we already have started, that we propose to strengthen in the future, we want to take advantage of the lessons learned on the safe coexistence between 5G and radio altimeter, the GNSS interference, that is a subject that we want to bring to the next conference in WRC 23, and also to take into account that the military users in aviation are also users of the spectrum, and we want to create a stronger synergy at the national level and European level to support the aviation interest on spectrum matters. Next slide. The more long-term objective as part of the second action that we have agreed is to develop a long-term European Union strategy for aviation in compliance with the relevant legislation that is prepared by both DG Connect and DG Move to improve aviation spectrum efficiency. There are different objectives of this action. As mentioned before, we want to protect the aviation remaining spectrum, to define criteria to protect the system components from harmful interference from other ITU services. But it's also what is important is that we have the policy objective to transition to a new generation of CNS systems that are going to be more spectrum efficient, and we will favor the deployment of systems that are spectrum efficient, and we will promote also the decommissioning of CNS systems that are less spectrum efficient. So the Commission, the European stakeholders, states including the military, are going to be part of the taking part on the preparation and approval of this strategy that we will have to develop in close coordination with our colleagues from DG Connect that are interfacing with the telecom industry. We will not start from scratch. We are going to take into account the work that has been already done in CESAR, in ICAO, in terms of the strategies. We want to apply an integrated CNSS with 2 S's because it's combining the S as an additional infrastructure of the spectrum for CNS. So we want to have an integrated approach where spectrum is a key element of the evolution. And as I mentioned, this is something that we cannot do alone in aviation. We want this to be an EU strategy, combining the needs of the telecom industry and the aviation industry. And third slide, I mentioned that the spectrum efficiency should be a driver for the future evolution of CNS systems in Europe, but we need to define first what spectrum efficiency means. And then we have this action with 2 objectives: to define a methodology to assess the aviation spectrum efficiency, considering best practices in other industries, like in the telecom industries. And we have already some examples in CESAR of system that has been based on the 4G technology that can be applied in aviation. and introduce spectrum efficiency as a key element for the future CNS evolution plan. So the responsible of this action is going to be the CESAR-3 joint undertaking and the future CNS program manager that will be in charge of preparing the CNS evolution plan. And in the action plan, we have identified that the work of the EuroCAE Working Group 1 to 4 and the RTCA Steering Committee 242 as one of the main bodies to provide guidance and inputs to undertake this action to ensure that the radio frequency characteristics of CNS systems use the spectrum efficiently. So that's the third action that we have agreed in the action plan that will help us to define the policy level activities and in close coordination between the DG Connect and DG Move. So that's it. These documents are available. If you are interested, I can share this information for those in particular in the US that are not familiar with the work of the CNS advisory group. But to finalize, I would like just to thank again for this opportunity to share these activities at more policy level in Europe. I hope the discussion of this summit will help to increase awareness within and outside the aviation community about the importance of spectrum for aviation, to facilitate a fruitful cooperation with other industries, in particular with the telecom industry that are our neighbors in terms of use of radio spectrum.